My name's Kelly. And I'm McCarty. Sorry. Welcome back. This week we are going to do the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire of 1911. So,
see, I was telling Jamie about this, and I forgot the shirtwaist part, because I was like, Triangle Shirt Factory doesn't sound right, but I can't remember what it is.
Okay. So, shirtwaist basically is a women's shirt. It's similar to a men's shirt in that it buttons down. It's got a high neck, kind of mutton sleeves, like puffy sleeves that fasten down here.
Are those called mutton sleeves?
I don't know. I think so. They're like bigger here, like lamb sleeves. I don't know. And they tie here, or they button here. And some of them, depending on how rich you were, would have like a lot of detail, like frills or ruffles or, pleats. And then there was also really ones that were very
like plain Jane.
Plain. And this is a time where prior to this, women's fashion had been very cumbersome. They were wearing hoop skirts. They were wearing bustles. Like they had
think Bridgerton
corsets.
Well, a little later.
Not quite Bridgerton because
this is later.
Quite a bit later, but their outfits are many layers, very cumbersome.
Cinderella. Isn't the lobster tail bustle really in at the late 1800s?
I have no idea.
Anyway, this is what year is this?
This is 1911.
Okay.
So this is like kind of either the start or like the height of the suffragette movement. Clothes are also becoming more like this type of clothing piece, the shirtwaist, was kind of like a piece of clothing that poor people could wear and the uber wealthy were wearing. So like everyone was wearing this kind of shirt. It went through different classes.
Isn't it also like one of the first times that clothes are being manufactured en masse?
Yes. So this is also a time where not only the rich people could buy ready-made clothes. Like before, women were,
and they're not custom.
Yeah,
like
women
before everything was custom.
Usually their clothes were custom made to them. They were ready or like made to order. This is the first time where they could like go to a store and pick out a shirt roughly in their size. It wasn't tailored exactly to them, and anybody could get them. It wasn't just the uber rich. And this time is also kind of like the New York tenements, like it's a little bit later than, or a little bit earlier than the Radium Girls, but it's the same idea, like poor working conditions, things like that.
If you've ever seen the movie Far and Away, is that similar to this?
I think so.
They work in a factory, except for, I guess, the whole country was probably already, whatever, I don't know.
I haven't seen it in so many years. Okay, so this happened in New York City in downtown Manhattan in the Garment District. It was March 25th, 1911. Let's see. We kind of already talked about that. Similar to the radium dial factories, this factory, it was called the Triangle Shirtwaist Company, or Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, something like that. Triangle was the name of the company, and it was ran by two men. I don't really care about them, so I don't think I wrote their names down. Ran by two men, and they rented the top three floors of this 10-story building. It was in New York. It was supposed to be an unburnable building. It's called the Asher Building. I don't know if it's still there.
Kind of like how the Titanic was supposed to be unsinkable.
Yeah. So it's called the Asher Building after the guy who designed it. And it ended up being, the building did not burn. So the building was unburnable, but it was this huge,
just everything inside,
devastating fire. So they would wear these shirts. Women were wearing these shirts with long, high-waisted skirts. And basically
Mary Poppins.
Yeah, kind of. Mary Poppins.
Because that takes place during the suffragette movement.
So like the radium dial factories that we talked about a few weeks ago, most of the girls it was mostly women.
Also, this is right before World War I.
Yeah, 1911. Mostly women, and they were mostly young girls. They were also predominantly immigrants, either Jewish or Italian immigrants. And these women were just trying to make any kind of money, living the American dream. They just came over. They're trying to.
And at that time, Italian immigrants Italians in general were like more darker skinned and more tan, and like they were thought of more as like the dirty Europeans.
Yeah. Same with the Irish.
Yeah.
So some of the girls,
meaning is America didn't like them either.
Yeah. some of the girls were as young as, I saw 15, but I also saw 13. So I think some of the girls were as young as 15 to 13 years old. They were all kind of in that age range. And I think most of them were, like, the oldest ones were, like, 23.
And they're all going to be unmarried.
Yeah. Well, no, because some of them, like, there was one family who, I don't know what the family's name was, and I don't remember, but, it was, like, a mother and 2 daughters worked at the factory together. Huh. So they were working, really long days, 7 days a week, really long hours, sometimes 12 to 13 hours a day, and they would maybe get half an hour for lunch. So it was really poor conditions. It was basically a sweatshop, but at the time it was not considered a sweatshop because there was big windows and it was like a big airy building. They weren't in the dark, like
in a basement, like sweatshops.
And that's what they considered to be sweatshops, was like living in a dark, cramped space. But because they had this huge factory and they had open spaces and windows and stuff, they were like, oh, this is a great job. This can't be a sweatshop.
Yeah.
And the women a lot of times had to use their own tools. Like, they had to use their own needles, their own thread, their own sewing machines. They had to bring their own materials to work. I think the company paid for the fabric. Mm-hmm. But yeah, they basically had to bring everything from home. And then there was no, so one of the ways that the factory was described was unsanitary.
That makes sense.
They said that there was, like, scraps of fabric everywhere. There was, like, scraps of paper. There was
bugs.
Yeah, it wasn't sanitary. And the women, there was not a bathroom.
I was gonna say there's gotta be some kind of bathroom issues.
There wasn't a bathroom in the building, and so the women would have to leave the building to go across the street or around the corner or something to relieve themselves. And then the managers, the people who worked there, the foreman or whatever, decided that the women were using the bathroom too much, so they locked the doors from the outside to prevent interruptions in the day.
Yeah, which makes sense.
So they started to lock the day to keep up productivity, and, like, so the women, basically they could, so I don't know if they were, like, peeing in buckets. I don't know what they're doing, if they're just not relieving themselves all day, or if they're, like, just not drinking or eating, but it was considered unsanitary. And
so that makes me wonder and think that there had to be some kind of, like, porta potty.
Right, but I mean, I didn't see anything that mentioned that, but
do they have indoor plumbing? Like, widely used? Probably in New York they would.
I think they had, like, if you were rich, you could have, like, a water closet. But I don't know for sure. I don't know what the bathroom situation was at that time, but I know it wasn't great in this building. So the factory employed about 500 people. They were ages about 13 to 23. So maybe they were just sisters and not a mom and daughter that were in.
Because 23, you'd have to be pretty young to have a daughter that's old enough to work.
Yeah.
There might be some outliers, but I feel like most of them would have been unmarried.
Yeah. So, like I said, mostly Jewish or Italian immigrants. The building was on the 8th, 9th, and 10th floor, or the factory was on those floors of the building.
Do you know what was underneath them?
No, I don't. Because of the so basically, as you probably have noticed from now, or from the title of the video and what I said earlier, a huge fire takes place.
Probably, like, likely a spark from, were they smoking in the building, I'm guessing?
They said it was probably a cigarette or a match that caught fire, and because they had so many scraps of fabric and tissue paper for, like, patterns and stuff, that it just went up like that. Within 15 minutes of the fire starting, everything was over.
Checks out. I'm gonna put this in my wallet so we
put that one too, just in case it's not expired. Anyway, so like I said, it was in Manhattan. The fire began to rage very quickly, and they did get the fire department did come to the building, but their ladders were not tall enough to reach the 10th floor, and they could only really reach the 6th floor. Ugh. And there was not enough water.
Did they have fire escapes?
There was, yes. I'll come back to that. There wasn't enough water to get to the top floors of the building. So basically in this time, they didn't really have sprinkler systems, and they didn't have much in terms of, like, regulations for factories or, like...
Or any regulations.
Yeah, they didn't have to do, like, fire drills. They didn't have to have, like... You know how now they have, like, a map where the fire exits are? They have signs for the fire exits.
They have fire exits?
Yes. So this building didn't have much for fire exits. I think they had maybe 1 or 2 doors to get out on each floor. They had 1 fire escape for the building, and which ended up collapsing. And then it mentioned somewhere that some factories would have buckets of water that they would use to put out fires, but obviously this fire was huge and they didn't have enough buckets of water. So they basically have no regulations. They have no OSHA, no anything like that where they have they don't have inspections. There's no overhead, rules. And there was nothing saying that the managers or the owners of the business, whoever, there was nothing saying that they couldn't lock them in the building. So, this was a massive, massive, massive disaster.
How many women are in the building, do you think?
500.
And all 3 floors to go, or just the top floor?
I think just the top 3 floors that the...
No, I mean, do all 3 of them catch fire, or is it just... Oh, the whole building catches fire?
I don't think it's the whole building. I know that they were on the 8th, 9th, and 10th building. I think maybe 10 and 11, or 10 and 9 caught fire. But there's 500 people in the factory. So it's like a pretty big place. And this disaster has been called the worst workplace disaster until 9/11. So this 1911, I know, this 1911 fire was...
Oh, it wasn't 2011. I was thinking...
No. This 1911 fire was the worst workplace disaster in America until 9/11.
What about, like, the Kansas City bombing?
I don't know if they consider that a workplace.
Well, it bombed a building. Maybe that was after 9/11?
I don't know. I think that was 95. I don't know when that was. But this is what it said, is that it was the worst work time.
Maybe that's not as big as I thought it was.
Workplace disaster. So the doors were locked from the outside. So the women couldn't escape the fire. There was a fire escape, and it ended up collapsing, and 12 women were on the fire escape.
In the fire, or in the doors, if I remember correctly, they opened in. So even if they could have gotten the doors open, the women pushing onto, like, trying to get out, push the doors, they couldn't open them. From what I understand?
I would guess. I didn't mention a lot of it, but I think
that today fire exits have to open out. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering if, like, this is kind of where that comes from. I want to say that happened.
I would agree that is probably something that happened.
Yeah. Because I feel like I remember that from something.
If they pushed out,
they might have been able to get out. They might have been able to break the doors.
Yeah.
But since they pulled in, you would need everyone to back up, and nobody's going to do that because they're frantic. It's an emergency.
Yeah, they're basically, everyone's running to the doors.
It's like when all those people died when they were getting squished for Black Friday. People were probably trampling everywhere.
And they didn't have fire plans at this time. They didn't have fire drills. None of the women knew where the exits were. I already put that. So in 15 minutes, 146 women were dead.
Ugh.
Within 15 minutes. So women were, the girls were trying, like, they were literally jumping out of the windows, trying to save themselves because they couldn't get out.
But also, in my opinion, falling to my death is going to be way quicker and way better than burning alive.
Right? Or
asphyxiate?
Yes. It's been a long day. So they were literally jumping from the building, and one man who was on the ground, one witness was saying that he had never heard a sound like the women falling to their death and they thought, people on the ground thought that the owners were throwing expensive fabric, like bolts of expensive fabric out the window, and then it would hit the ground. And the one guy said, yeah, it was a human body. The one guy said that all he heard around him was thud, dead, thud, dead, thud, dead, because they were just thudding to the ground and they were dead. And 146 women died. And
what if you put, like, 10 feet per floor? They're falling, like, 80 feet at least.
Yeah, I don't know how tall a 10-story building is, but it's pretty tall. So they were even trying
or 10 feet per story.
There was, like, an elevator, and so they were trying to shimmy down the elevator cables, but then they fell to their death, too. So at the time, factories were very dangerous. Like I said, they had no regulations. They had no...
The pay probably wasn't very good. Conditions.
They were working like 12, 13 hours a day.
But then also, the Triangle Factory is probably still one of the better ones, because then you have, like, the factories where they're, like, butchering chickens or the meat plants, and those are probably going to be, like, 1,000 times worse. Right?
Yeah. So,
or, like, some of the steel Or
Yeah.
whatever other, I don't
I
know
mean,
what they
because
were
you
doing.
can't really have too many work. This did say something about. Okay, so some estimates say that during this time period, 100 people died in factories every day. Like, they were so dangerous that at least 100 people died every day. And, like, I mean, that's just an estimate. We can't know that for sure, but that's a pretty
That's a
large
lot.
number
Yeah.
per day for factories. Like,
I mean, if you think about it, that's how many people died this day. I mean, more
than this.
But
So this led to a lot of unrest. A lot of the workers were like, this is ridiculous. We can't be working in these dangerous jobs anymore. We need regulations. We need rules. So they started striking and saying they weren't going to go to work until the laws changed. And then they started doing rallies and stuff like that. And there was one rally that as many as 350,000 people showed up to this rally in New York.
how is there even that many people in New York?
Right? And they marched to get safety regulations. They marched for new regulations for unions and pay and safety, and they fought for this was also during the suffragette movement, so women were used to marching at this time.
Are they is this before we start getting like the mandatory 40-hour weeks and things like that,
so.
or is this after?
I don't know that for sure,
yeah.
but I think this is when they start doing like very
Instead of working 7 days, they work 6 days.
well, I think this is when they start doing like 8-hour work days. Like they have to like, otherwise you have to pay overtime.
Yeah,
I think. So the governor, I think it was like the governor or someone of New York.
the mayor.
No, it was a higher up. Eventually they passed a bunch of safety measures that demanded things like you weren't allowed, like, you know how sometimes now businesses will have like a sign on the door that says this door is to remain open during business hours.
Yeah.
Like, if you have, like, even I work at an eye clinic, we're not allowed to lock the door unless if there's patients in the building, we can't lock the doors. Because it's a safety hazard, you have to have a door that can open if there's an emergency. So that is one of the laws that they enacted. You weren't allowed to lock them in from the outside anymore, which, common sense, you shouldn't be able to lock your employees in. They also had to add, like, businesses had to add more fire exits. They had to have more fire escapes. I think that they started requiring like sprinkler systems at this time, some kind of sprinkler system. They had to have fire drills. They had to have a fire plan. Exits had to be clearly marked. So pretty much all of these things were, and they passed like 20 something laws, 40 laws, pretty like in the years immediately after this.
Well, if you look today when they built, if you look at most buildings, there is at least one door that opens out. And I think that's where this comes from. Like, almost no doors in public buildings open out or in because it's a safety thing.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, the emergency exits open out.
The owners, there was 2 men who were the owners of the factories. I didn't write their names down. I don't care about the men in this situation. Sorry. They were charged with manslaughter. They pled not guilty, and the courts agreed with them. Which I don't know how.
In my thoughts, it sucks, and they should be slapped with a fine. But to be fair, they weren't there, probably. The foreman, if anyone, whoever's locking them in.
And I think the owners were the foremen. Like, I think they were the ones. They were charged with manslaughter because the doors were locked from the outside.
Okay, yeah.
That's the biggest reason that they got charged with manslaughter.
Because, like, you can't, I mean, you can prevent a fire, but locking the doors is like,
common sense, not good. So they were found not guilty, but they later had 23 civil suits filed against them from the victims' families. And they were ordered, or with the settlement, they had to pay $75 per victim.
Which, honestly, is probably a lot back then.
I didn't do the math, but 1911. I'm going to do the math now because I want to know.
Yeah, I'm very curious about it.
$75 in 1911. So it would have been about $2,000, $2,500 today.
Okay, so not really that much.
Not really that much.
But when you're making like $1 a week, or like
I think they made $6 a week.
A week?
Yeah.
I was joking.
I will double check. I'm pretty sure I have that in here
So
somewhere.
that's like 12 weeks of work.
Yeah. Yeah, they made about $6 a week. But then again, they're working like 12 or 13 hours a day. That's too much. And they were working 7 days a week. That's not enough money.
No.
That's not enough money.
Even in those terms, I think. If $75 is only $2,500, like, that's nothing.
$6.
They're making pennies. Let's see. Oh, that's gonna make you insult again.
It's worth they were making $33 a week. No, $1 was $33. They're making $200 a week
In our terms.
in our money.
So about $800 a month. I don't know. It's still hard.
I don't know.
Because everything's so expensive now. It's like, I can't even fathom.
Maybe they were making good money then. I don't know. $6 doesn't sound like enough. So then after this,
I mean, they probably still had things that cost a penny.
probably.
Because if in 1930, Grandpa could get candy for a nickel.
So they were pressured by many activist groups in New York at this time to change the rules regarding safety, sanitation, and inspection. So they basically, after this, they had to create. I think New York was maybe one of the first ones to do this, and then they started spreading throughout the country. And then I don't know if OSHA was a thing yet, but or like the Department of Labor. I don't know if any of that was a thing yet, but these incidences kind of, this and the Radium Girls kind of led up to all of those things.
Well, those things not only protect the
Worker,
employees,
but
but
the
also,
employee.
yeah, it also protects the employees or employers.
It just seems crazy. Like, we lived through a fire. Everyone who knows me is gonna talk or like roll their eyes because I talk about this all the time.
And my little sisters are gonna be like,
they're gonna roll their eyes too.
Why did it affect you so much? Like, because they don't remember, but I remember.
We were 4 and our house burned down, and I don't remember much, but I remember enough to be scared of house fires. Like to the point where I can't use a crock pot if I'm not home, which I know is and that's not even why the fire started, but I can't use a crock pot because in my mind it's gonna start a fire. It's a whole thing. I should probably talk to my therapist about it, but
You know, I think I'm also scared of fires and crock pots, but I've also left candles burning for a while when I wasn't home.
she will have a candle burning and she'll leave the house and there'll just be a candle burning.
I forget about them, and then the poor cats. I really need to.
She's not allowed to use candles anymore without supervision. That's a rule that we're enacting today.
No, I haven't even opened a candle.
Because you're not allowed to use candles without me there.
What I've been doing instead is using the warmer on the stove.
So, you know, on stoves, they have
it
that
doesn't
one
get that
warmer area. She'll put a candle on that and warm it. But I'm like, you still can't leave the stove on.
I've never
when
left
we're
the stove
gone.
on when we've been gone. Not since we lived in Idaho.
Oh my gosh, we've had 2 fires.
Oh, yeah.
We had a fire as an adult. So
It was just an oven fire. Like, it didn't...
We lived in
It was
an
so
old
scary.
apartment during grad school.
We had an
And
old stove.
The stove was old, and for some reason, the stove was turned on, and we knew that there was a fire in there, but we were scared of backdraft, even though I've never seen that movie. I was scared that if we opened the fire, or opened the oven, the fire would come out and we'd all die. And we had cats at the time. We have 4 cats, but we had 2 cats at the time. And we, like, just sat there, and the apartment's, like, getting hot, and we call the maintenance people, and it was, like, an hour goes by, and it's, like, boiling in our apartment, just sweating. And Cardi calls the non-emergent fire line, and she goes, I think there's a fire in my oven. I'm scared to open it. Do you think I need to call the fire department? I really don't want to bother anybody.
He's like, yes.
He's like, yeah, you need to call the fire department. So we call the fire department, and they're like, yeah, get your cats and meet us outside. And they showed up in like 2 seconds. So, because we lived right by the fire department, and the cops came, and we weren't ready with the cats yet. So then we put the cats in the car, and they brought like 4 or 5 fire trucks, and then we didn't have an oven for a week. But I forgot about that. That was also traumatizing. I don't know why I chose to do a video on fire when I'm a little bit scared of fire.
But also, this was a pretty good one. This is an interesting story.
It's pretty interesting. Honestly, the shirts are kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like, I think I would wear a Triangle Shirtwaist
Yeah.
I think they're just called shirtwaists. I
Same.
think that was just the factory, but I would wear one if they had it today. As long as I didn't have to iron it.
Yeah, I wouldn't iron it.
I don't like ironing.
Anyway,
Well, that's all
that's
we
all
have. Sorry for the rant about the fire. That just gets me going.
Yeah. So what did we learn?
Stresses me out.
Don't lock doors from the outside.
Yes, never lock a door from the outside
Unless
because that's crazy.
you're like leaving your house. If there's people in the house in a public building, don't lock the door from the outside.
Well, because even when you leave, I mean,
Jump out a window.
yeah, they jumped out windows. That seems so crazy. But I think also,
Did anyone survive jumping out of the window?
I don't know, but I think they did that in 9/11 too. I think people were jumping out the window to try and survive in much taller building. But
So sad.
I'm glad that my office is on a first floor.
Mine's on the 3rd floor.
I could easily jump out the window. We don't have a taller floor.
Yeah, I'm on the 3rd floor, so I could also probably easily. It's not that high. Plus the way that the
As long as it's on grass.
Yeah.
It might break a leg or something, but well, that took a dark turn. But
anyway,
hopefully no one ever has fires. But yeah, how crazy. I just think that what a time to live in. Like, now is the time to live in. Like, things are getting dicey, but can you imagine just living in, I mean, it's basically the Wild Wild West. There's no rules. There's no regulations. We need rules and regulations.
yeah. Anyway, so me and Kelly are going to the Six, the play or musical or whatever,
Sixth musical. I'm so excited.
in May. So from now until then, on my weeks that I choose topics, I'm going to be doing the Six Wives. So
And on my weeks, if I don't have another topic, then I'm going to steal hers.
So next week I'm going to do Catherine of Aragon, and then we'll just kind of go through them. If only I do it on my weeks, we'll only get through 4 wives. Who's the 4th?
So maybe I have to do it on my weeks too.
Well, it doesn't matter.
But we'll try and get all 6 wives in before we see Sixth musical.
because I think that'd be fun.
And then maybe we'll talk about Sixth musical after
I
this week.
cannot wait. I'm so excited.
I'm so excited too. I've listened to the soundtrack. It's really short. There's only like 9 or 10 songs. It looks really good.
Anyway, it's getting hot in here and I want to go home.
I know, I'm really hungry. So we live here.
I know, but like this isn't my room.
All right, well that's all. Sorry for the rambling as per usual, but
Bye.
bye. Like and subscribe, do all the things.